Hello, you are tuning in to AWANI Review with me, Cynthia Ng. Today we are recording this episode on the sidelines of MEFCAP's Accelerating Ventures event, whereby this morning we have been talking a lot about breaking down barriers for women in the digital world. So we want to bring some of that discussion over to this episode, whereby we will be focusing a bit more on funding, because the reality is that women still face systemic barriers to access funding. And joining me on the show today, we have two very special guests. On my right, we have Lennise Ng. She is the co-founder and CEO of Dropee, which is a B2B buying and selling online marketplace. Thank you, Lennise, for coming on the show. And next to her, we have Tsao, co-founder of venture capital firm of Gobi Partners. Tom, I believe, is a New York native, but has been in Malaysia since 2015.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, it's great to have you on this show. My second time interviewing you, so excited to have you back. Maybe if we can begin, just to give a bit of context about what are some of the limitations or challenges that women founders face. There is no doubt that starting and scaling a business is a challenge for any entrepreneur. But in your experience, Lennise, what limitations do you currently see for a female entrepreneur like yourself?
I think the limitation as a female entrepreneur pretty much is the same as a lot of other male entrepreneurs that we see out there. I think the community over the last 5 years, especially within the last 5 years, has made it more inclusive for a lot of women founders like myself, right? Not only in terms of support, but also access and to actually find great networks to actually bring my business from point A to point B. It's still definitely an issue. There's still a lot more room to improve on, yes. However, I think at least in Southeast Asia, because we've talked about this quite a fair bit within this region, and therefore we have great, personally, I think I'm very fortunate to have met a lot of very supportive investors, a lot of very supportive community partners, and even industry partners as well. Because especially when I'm in the supply chain industry, it is traditionally a very male-dominated space. But as a young female entrepreneur, I don't really feel that way. Just that mainly because perhaps I have really, really great community around me to support the network.
That's fantastic to hear. But I do want to get your a sense about raising capital for women, which is the topic of this discussion. Do you feel that you have to work twice as hard or be twice as smart when you go into a room to pitch your ideas?
No, honestly, I think I've had spoken about this with a lot of other female entrepreneurs as well. Similarly to other male entrepreneurs and male founders too, we prep almost equally as hard as them. I think at the end of the day, as founders, right, the key here is to figure out, are we building certain things that are creating of value? I think gone are the days where, at least from my experience, gone are the days where I would meet investors that are more skewed towards guys because they think that they are more, their business and their execution is more scalable, or they're faster than women. I don't think that that's the case because they're very numbers driven. Numbers don't lie at the end of the day. It's at the end of the day, it's all about how you storytell, how do you meet, and how do you show up, and how do you present your data, and answering the ultimate question as a founder, right? Are you creating something that is of value towards the market or the industry that you're trying to solve?
And with that, I'll go to Tom, who sits across the room to founders like her, when deciding to see, okay, is this idea worth investing, worth putting time and effort in? Tom, what do you think about, when I talk about barriers which I discussed earlier in the forum at MEFCAP? Do you feel that there is still a systemic barrier to women to access funding?
Well, I think it's not only just for women. I think there's there's a systemic barrier for early stage funding all across because of the current environment we're in. And I think what Lennise has pointed out already is I think the industry, has shown progress. And if I were to put that into context, I would say the systemic barrier, and I think it's getting better, but we're nowhere near where we should be, is, I was talking about it before, it's like when Gobi first started off in '02, there was a lot of these kind of maybe implicit biases that, like entrepreneurs from China couldn't innovate, okay? And again, people thought, that was a challenge. We saw that as an opportunity, right? And then we saw the same thing happen in Southeast Asia. I mean, literally, Lennise will remember this. I mean, when I came out to KL in 2015, people didn't think that Southeast Asia could even produce a unicorn. And again, on our panel today, we had Juliet at Carsum, right? And Gobi's taken that, and we saw the same thing with Muslim entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs trying to innovate for the digital Muslim economy. And I think women are kind of at the same. I think Lennise has pointed out some great things, and I think Lennise is she's a great entrepreneur, right? But I think in general for women, there is that because there just hasn't been enough success. Is it because VCs are going out there going, we'll never invest into women? I don't think it's stated. I just think, again, people are generally, all of us, we're lazy, we're stupid, we do what everybody's doing, we tend to follow the herd.
But also, I would like to point out the fact of the matter is that within the tech space, the number of women entrepreneurs is still significantly lower compared to male entrepreneurs. So I think women in STEM, there's still a lot more of cultivation and nurturing where we want to encourage more younger girls to actually know that this is an industry where they can also thrive, and we want to encourage that as well. So perhaps that's also contributes part of the systematic bias in a way, to see that like when it comes on investments wise, always about the pool. When you're an investor, how big is the pool that you're investing in? And if just so happened that majority of the pool is male, naturally, that's where the investments would probably skew towards too. Okay. So I think there's still a lot more work on a grassroots levels that needs to be done as well.
So you're saying that the pool of women entrepreneurs is smaller compared to men, hence the money is not going as much into women-led founders. But I think I do want to play devil's advocate here a bit, not to disregard what you have just said. I mean, if you look at the access to finance for women entrepreneurs, it is well documented that only about on average, global average, 2% of VC funding goes into women-led startup. So, and this figure has ranged between 1.8 to 2.7 in the last 10 years. So while I think it's great that you have received that kind of support, but Tom, why is the funding gap seems to be stagnant in terms of allocation of funds? What is the conversation among your peers when it comes to funding?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, when you look at that, I mean, Gobi, we study demographics. And that, when I look at our history, that's why we went into China, right? Again, Silicon Valley did not invest into China, right? When we started the business back in '02. And you looked at China, 1.4 billion people. I mean, there was sort of this mindset that, people from China just couldn't innovate. And again, that changed. So when you look at the demographics, and that's why we've applied it's the same kind of a framework. We looked at, that's why we have a term called Takwa Tech, right? And when you look at the Muslim population, 2 billion people, it's bigger than China. And when you look at the demographics, what's bigger than Takwa Tech? Women. Yeah. That's what, a 4 billion potential market opportunity set. So I think there's a lag. Mm-hmm. I think to us, when Gobi looks at it, we see it as an opportunity. We've been investing in female entrepreneurs, and we want to invest into more great female entrepreneurs like Lennise. We're doing it not because we have to. We're doing it because we want to, and because we just study this and we go, wow, let's get ahead of the curve. And my guess is one day we're going to look back at this in Astro AWANI's archives. Yeah. We're going to be talking about it with my daughter, or people are going to be laughing like, oh my God, people used to think that. It's just like now when we look back, I mean, when we started the business in '02, people literally were not investing into Chinese startups because they were like, I remember US LPs going, can Chinese entrepreneurs create real innovation?
Is the question still being asked, can women
Well, I
become
think
real
we got, I mean, the two female panelists on our panel today got asked that question. So again, there's that perception gap. And again, it's sort of unfair. You'd never ask a male entrepreneur, even in
Never.
Southeast Asia, that question.
Exactly. I was going to say that as well. But also, because that statistics is a global stat.
Yeah.
I'm a Southeast Asia founder. So what I experience and what I know, I'm very blessed with having such a strong community here that is also very forward-looking. But I think we also have to point out, right, how much of these investments, like of Southeast Asian investments, contributes to that 2%. There's a lot more investment that goes outside, like elsewhere of the other regions, like in the US, in Europe, etc. Of which I think Tom and his team, Gobi, is trying to change that, and it really takes an effort because I can't speak on the other regions. It could also be because of cultural biases as well, where there must be some other factors that also contributes to that 2%. It's not that it purely comes from the investor side.
Okay. Oh, well, in that case, I do want to ask Tom, because you have worked in different markets, the US and China, and now focusing in Southeast Asia. What strengths do you see in the startup culture here? Lennise is talking about the support and network that she's getting to help her grow her business. What are the differences, have you noticed?
Well, at least in Malaysia, what I'm noticing is I think there is that strong institutional support. And what do I mean by that? It's like, look, VCs, we're part of the puzzle. Okay, VCs, we have to raise our capital from other people. Okay, so one of the things that I think, again, we've got strong allies for women, right? Like MavCap. Dara Wadi, a board member of MavCap, right? Amy, the COO of MavCap, strong allies. They're in positions of leadership. MavCap is the biggest venture fund of funds, right? The premier one in Malaysia. On top of that, Malaysia, sometimes we don't report this, and I want to shout this out now. Two of the biggest institutional LPs, right? QuOP. CEO of QuOP is Nick. She's a woman. You don't even see that in the US, a woman leading such a big pension fund. And then let's not forget Rohaya at EPF. I think that's even bigger. So in Malaysia is very lucky. You already have very strong, powerful women leading the largest LPs. And so when they kind of just nudge that direction, for us, we spot opportunity. But again, we need people to help us with the capital so we can invest into those. When our LPs are also saying, no, when they're saying, no, don't do it, that's harder for us. But when we have supportive LPs, right, like we're seeing here in Malaysia, and saying, hey, go out, look at these things, because, we're always on the front line. I mean, you should feel a little sympathy for the early stage guys too, right? I mean, we're working with entrepreneurs. They're giving us a PowerPoint. We have to make a decision, and if we don't react fast enough, the entrepreneur's like, I'm going to go with somebody else. And then we're literally wedded to you, the entrepreneur, for 10 years. And then everybody wants everybody says they're a long-term investor until they're not.
They will not.
Right?
Okay.
And then, we got the bigger guys, the PE guys who are coming in with much bigger checks, bigger management fees, crowding us out, right? So, hey, have a little sympathy for the early VC guys. But you know what I'm saying. But I think Malaysia's got that, the support system as Lennise. It may not exist everywhere.
Yeah, it does not exist everywhere. And that contributes back to that 2%, right? And I do hope that, whatever that we're building here in Malaysia and eventually across the region, with strong partners and strong companies like Gobi, right, would eventually be the reference point for other regions to also look into and say that, hey, I also want this sort of experience, and this is how I want to build my community across.
This is such a refreshing take, from a female founder, because often when we discuss about women in the digital world, we talk about limitations and challenges, and you rightly pointed about nudging the direction, to the right places, right investments, right people. And I do wonder, does having more women in leadership positions, does that help things, to expedite things, Tom?
Oh, absolutely. I think this 30%, I forget what it's 30% club or the 30% initiative, that's just fantastic. That's needed, right? And in fact, I think it's going to become the 50% club, because when you just look at demographics, it just makes sense. And so, absolutely, just within Gobi's portfolio, if I can share, it's gender diverse teams have performed better. I mean, when I look at our portfolio, some of our best performing companies, Air Wallix, right? That's Jack and Lucy, right? When you look at Carsum, right? It's Eric, JT, and, right, Juliet. Right? When we look at Aerodyne, it's Kamarul and Azita. I mean, these are gender diverse teams, because diversity, and it makes sense. When you're in the fast moving startup world, you need to be resilient. Resiliency actually means that you got to be prepared for any type of scenario. Well, if you need to be prepared for any type of scenario, wouldn't it make sense to have a pretty diverse team so you can kind of, hedge yourself on the different scenarios that are coming? So it completely makes sense. I think the things we're talking about, look, VCs, although we like to think we're cutting edge, we're so innovative, most of us are not. It's hard. It's hard to break away from the crowd, right? When everybody's talking about one trend and we all love these buzzwords, right? I mean, just think about like a year ago what everybody was talking about. Name some of the acronyms. Are those acronyms still popular now?
Well,
and so what I'm saying is, for women right now, we're still early stages. It will. It's gonna. I don't know when the switch is gonna go on, but then when the switch goes on in a couple of years, we're gonna be talking about a bubble of female, right? Because it's just capital is always slow, and then when it realizes something, everybody jumps in. But I agree. We're still at very early stages. I think this is something. I think it's one of the biggest investment opportunities for probably the next 10 to 20 years. I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
Well, hopefully by then we have a larger community of like women in tech as well, not only just in the workforce, but women stepping up as founders in entrepreneurship, as leaders, so that they can actually create more change, right? We need bigger generation, like a bigger community to contribute into this.
All right. Well, so that aside, I do want to talk a bit about the outlook when investors are taking a more conservative view in terms of investing, especially with the impending slower growth, global slower growth. So I do wonder if that has factored into decision-making process when it comes as a VC.
Yeah, well, I think the general slowdown has definitely, VCs are what we call pulling back to the core, right? So, we may have been at a faster pace before, but again, right now is the first thing VC, you got to save your own companies, right? So you're allocating more for existing portfolio companies, for follow-ons. Unfortunately, sometimes they have to be even down rounds, right? So yes, everybody's kind of pulling back to the core. That does leave less, which is why the entire market has slowed down, right? But then again, I think for experienced firms like ourselves, when we've been through these cycles, right, the best time to be investing is in cycles like now, right? Because valuations are, I think now, much more realistic, right, when you're having the conversation, right? Lennise is laughing, right? But she knows exactly what I'm saying. Valuations are more realistic. And what I love about down markets like now is the entrepreneurs you're meeting. They're doing it for what I call more pure reasons. And I think, when the markets are going up, I always laugh, and again, no disrespect to all the consultants or investment bankers out there. I always notice that when markets are going up, when you see the consultants, the investment bankers ready to jump ship, now they're ready to do a startup, that's always an indicator of something. Because in a down market, none of them are doing that. So the entrepreneurs now that you're meeting now, they're either crazy, they're either stupid, like they haven't been reading the headlines, or they're compelled to do it, right? These are the entrepreneurs then that, even in a down environment, they're like, I have to do this. I don't care if I'm making money or not, but I'm driven by mission and purpose. And in a down environment like this, that it's less likely for those guys to get lost in the noise. And so for us, because we know cycles will go down, but we also know cycles will correct. If we can meet those entrepreneurs, that's the best time to be investing into that. And in fact, history has shown the best time to be investing into early stage startups is when the market's down, because that's when the next big winners that can survive this downturn are resilient enough. Those become the winners of tomorrow.
Now, turning to Lenny, the reason why I brought up that question and putting a gender lens to it, because earlier we were just talking about how there are benefits to being a women founder at this point in time. And part of it is because women, they're more conservative and they're more thoughtful in their decision. If you look at every dollar of investment raised, and women-led startups tend to outperform compared to
Essentially creating more value.
Creating more value. So what are your thoughts about it, Lennise?
I completely resonate with what Tom was saying, right? I think right now there's a lot of more opportunity to spot the actual entrepreneurs rather than the founders, so-called founders that are just playing musical chairs. At the end of the day, there's a difference between being like, going back to the root, just wording terms, right? Being an entrepreneur versus being a businessman or a businesswoman. Being an entrepreneur is to figure out like, how can you create solutions to real life problems? And you are always on that problem solving mode. Being a businessman or a woman, it's about how do you find opportunity to make money out of that market or that gap that you're at. Completely different school of thoughts, right? Now, investors can invest in both. You get your ROIs in there. But if you're talking about funds that just really want to support founders that just create solutions to real world problems, now is the perfect opportunity because, like what Tom says, it's crazy for anyone who wants to start a startup at this era, like at this phase in time.
If you're looking for quick money, right?
Yeah, you can't. It will be a very silly move.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to women like entrepreneurs, I think just because naturally they're also wired in a way where you have to be a bit more practical in terms of every dollar that you receive and how much where do you spend it, how much you spend it. There tends to be also the focus on every single investment that we raise, how much of this dollar can we create and milk it to create that value for the community or the users or the customers that we serve. I can't say that this applies for all women out there. I do know like founders in general, there are different types of founders in different types of mindsets, but the key difference here is the fact that when we're raising, when women generally are raising, it's all about figuring out how much is enough to actually grow and create that value to the next stage. And then it's about sustainability, right?
Do you see that difference in terms of female founders and male founders? The mindset.
Again, in terms of, again, this is a gross...
It's a very wet blanket kind of thing, right?
Generalization, but I would agree with what Lennise is saying,
Okay. All right, in the final couple of minutes that we have, I do want to find out about your strategy this year. If there's one word to encapsulate this coming year that is going to be quite challenging, what would it be for you and Dropee?
One word.
Well, one strategy or one word.
I think just, I can give you in like a quote. I think slow is fast right now.
Can you elaborate a bit more?
Take this opportunity to reel it back in and really look back at the core fundamentals of your business. Where can you actually create most value? And from there, sometimes you just have to rework, restructure, and rebuild certain aspects of your business in order to scale it up within the next 1, 2, 3 years, where the capital will, I hope by then, would flood back into the market, right? So at that point in time, the company is stronger, more resilient, like ready to really go on year 6.
All right, so reel back in, re-strategize. What about Tom on the other side of the table? looking at deals, and which has been quite quiet. So what are you seeing at the moment?
Is it one word or can I? No, I can't think of one word. So no, I think it's actually. I mean, look, our view is. I don't know how many words this is, but the best time to be investing is now. Right, we're going to keep to our strategy. We feel very lucky that we have long-term LPs who want to not only invest for returns but also for impact. Right? And so I think, again, what we've learned over the last 20 years is that you don't get scared off by cycles. Again, you don't get too high when the markets are nearing all-time highs, and you don't get too low. Now, markets correct. This is the natural cycles of the business. And history has shown us that it's during these down cycles, when everybody's kind of like negative, that's the best time.
And Gobi has been in Malaysia, what, 8 years now?
8 years.
How many companies have Gobi founded?
We have now invested into more than 40
Malaysian companies.
Malaysian companies.
Okay. And are you still feeling positive?
We are still in it. I mean, I don't know. We just invested into. We just announced we just invested into 4 companies, right?
You're very active.
Durio, right? Paywatch. Oh boy, who are the other 2? I can't think of them now. But we just announced that. Look that up, okay? I'm having a senior moment here, okay? But I mean, you know, this is. We continue to invest. You got to continue investing into the business.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lennise and Tom, for doing this interview. It's
Thank
great
you
to
for
speak to
having
you
us.
Yeah, no,
both,
thank
and
you.
hopefully
Yeah, absolutely.